Have you ever wondered why the strongest people are the quietest in the room? It's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they've outgrown the need to react. Power doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It waits. And when it moves with precision. The moment you stop reacting to everything that pokes your pride, you become unpredictable, and the unpredictable man dominates, not through noise, not through chaos, but through calm. This silence isn't weakness, it's control, and control is where true power is born. That's why today we go to the root of all reactions, and we cut them off one by one, because the one who doesn't flinch becomes the one everyone fears. But here's the part most people miss. The moment you stop reacting, you take control of the conversation, of the energy in the room, of the narrative. Most people are slaves to their triggers. One harsh word, one disrespectful glance, and they explode, defend, or collapse. That's not power, that's programming. True power doesn't live in the reaction. It lives in the space after the trigger, where silence becomes a decision, not a retreat. Imagine someone insults you in front of others. Most will respond instantly. They argue, raise their voice, try to win. But the man who simply looks back, unmoved, unbothered, that's the one who truly owns the moment. His stillness isn't weakness, it's calculation. And in that pause, he sends a signal no words ever could. I'm not here to prove anything. Because power that explains itself isn't power. It's insecurity in disguise. This is the part where silent dominance begins. Not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you've already mastered it. The fight isn't worth your reaction, and that makes you untouchable. You shift from being controlled to becoming the one in control. That silence, it echoes louder than 1,000 justifications. It makes people wonder, respect, fear. So the next time you're triggered, try this. Don't respond, not because you're weak, but because you've already won. That's the shift most people never make. They live their lives in defense mode, constantly proving, reacting, explaining, and they wonder why no one respects their presence. Presence isn't about volume, it's about gravity, the kind that pulls people in without effort, without noise. When you no longer feel the urge to explain your silence, you begin to embody it. You move through conversations without flinching, without chasing approval. Your stillness becomes strategy. Your pause becomes a message. The loudest man in the room usually has the least to say. But the one who listens, absorbs, and holds back, that's the man people remember. That's the man others fear interrupting. And the irony is, the moment you stop trying to be powerful, you become it. It's not a performance, it's a presence. You don't chase validation. You don't react to bait. let others expose themselves while you remain unshaken. In that stillness, the real game unfolds. Power doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to defend its silence. It just is. And that kind of power, the kind born in silence, the kind that speaks through absence, that's the one people can't ignore. That's the one that rewires the room. Because when you don't flinch, you don't lose. When you don't explain, you dominate. There's a strange shift that happens when you stop reacting. People don't just see you differently. They treat you differently. They hesitate before challenging you. They lower their voice around you. They measure their words. Why? Because you're not emotionally available for their games anymore. You've pulled your power back from the surface and anchored it deep inside. Most people throw their emotions at every small inconvenience. They argue over opinions. They explode when misunderstood. But the person who pauses, thinks, observes, and doesn't flinch, that person becomes a mystery. And mystery is magnetic. You don't need to shout to command attention. In fact, silence makes people lean in. It creates tension, and in that tension, you gain control. Think of it like this. Everyone's busy talking. You stay silent. Suddenly, your silence becomes the loudest voice in the room. People project onto you. They wonder what you're thinking. They second-guess themselves. And you remain in control without ever saying a word. That's the real advantage of not reacting. You don't just protect your peace. You build authority, because anyone can argue, anyone can defend, but not everyone can hold back with purpose. And the more you do, the more your silence becomes your brand. It signals that you're not easily moved, not easily shaken, and definitely not easy to manipulate. This kind of presence is rare. That's why it stands out. So next time someone tries to provoke you, don't give them what they expect. Don't play the role they've assigned you. Instead, hold the line. Let your silence speak. Let your lack of reaction become your reputation. Because when you don't explain yourself, you force others to confront themselves, and that's where power begins. If this silence speaks to something in you, hit subscribe and stay with us. The next level of self-mastery starts here. True power doesn't raise its voice, it doesn't explain itself, it just is. When people don't get a reaction from you, they feel the weight of your silence. They try harder, they push more, they provoke deeper. But every time they meet stillness, something shifts inside them. They begin to doubt themselves. They replay what they said. They start questioning why they even needed your attention in the first place. And that's when you win. See, the world is loud because people are scared. They talk too much because they're insecure. They explain everything because they're seeking permission. But when you live without needing approval, when your silence becomes your signal, you enter a completely different category of human. You're not just liked, you're respected. You're not just respected, You're untouchable. People begin to talk about you when you leave the room because you didn't try to be understood. You just existed with presence. Think about the last time someone gave you complete silence in response to your drama. It probably hit harder than any insult ever could, because silence has a mirror. It forces people to look at themselves. That's the power you build when you no longer play their game. No defending, no explaining, just silence, certainty, and presence. You become the gravity in the room, and they can't help but orbit around you. Silence isn't passive, it's not weakness, it's strategic. Most people misunderstand it. They think if you're quiet, you have nothing to say. They assume if you're not reacting, you're scared. But true silence is a decision. It's you saying, I don't owe you my energy. It's the power to conserve, to contain, and to control yourself and the room. The ones who master silence aren't suppressing emotion. They're choosing when and how to use it. They know not every battle is worth fighting. Not every opinion needs a response. And so, while everyone else is busy reacting, they're observing, calculating, positioning themselves, because silence gives you space, space to see clearly, space to think without noise, space to act without being pushed. And in that space, you grow. Power isn't about volume, it's about gravity, the kind of energy that makes people adjust their tone around you, the kind that fills a room without saying a word. You become the standard, and people rise or fall in your presence. You don't interrupt, you don't beg to be heard. You don't chase validation. You wait, you hold, you choose. And that restraint, that's what makes you unforgettable. You're not here to be loud. You're here to be felt. Because the ones who move the world rarely need to explain themselves. Some people spend their lives trying to be heard, trying to win arguments, trying to look powerful. But the truth, real power is quiet. It doesn't explain. It doesn't announce. It doesn't perform. It simply exists and forces the world to respond. If you have to keep telling people who you are, you haven't become it yet. The loudest one in the room is rarely the one in control, because control isn't about volume, it's about energy, presence, stillness. Think of the people you truly respect. Was it their noise that moved you, or the way they stood without shaking when everyone else collapsed? We've been taught that to matter, we have to be loud, but the ones who matter most often say the least. So the next time you feel the urge to prove yourself, don't. Hold your power and watch how the world leans in, not because you demanded their attention, but because your silence made them curious. What would happen if you stopped explaining and just let your silence do the talking? If this made you feel seen, you're not alone. Subscribe, and let's build the kind of strength that never needs to raise its voice.